adventure starts with the right gear, and it all starts at shackshop.us. From stylish women's swimsuits and premium camping tents to paddleboards, underwater drones, and dependable dinghies, we have everything you need for your next outdoor adventure. Whether you're exploring the water or relaxing on shore, gear up with quality products at unbeatable prices. Visit shackshop.us today and make every adventure.
Trump UFO files reveal chilling reports of a silent 500-foot triangle and mysterious figures in spacesuits for decades. Reports of enormous triangular objects silently crossing American skies have occupied one of the strangest corners of the UFO mystery. Now, newly released government records are putting some of those extraordinary accounts back into the public spotlight. The latest wave of UFO and unidentified anomalous phenomena, or UAP, disclosures ordered by President Donald Trump contains reports ranging from strange objects observed near sensitive military locations to bizarre historical accounts involving alleged occupants wearing unusual suits and helmets. One of the most intriguing themes emerging from the records is the description of enormous, apparently silent objects, including triangular craft, operating close to American military facilities. The reports do not prove that the objects were extraterrestrial spacecraft. In fact, the government explicitly characterizes the released material as unresolved cases in which officials cannot make a definitive identification. But the extraordinary descriptions are enough to reignite one of the oldest questions surrounding UFO investigations. What exactly were witnesses seeing? A massive triangle in the night sky among the most enduring UFO descriptions is the so-called Black Triangle. Witnesses have repeatedly described enormous triangular or delta-shaped objects moving slowly through the sky without the engine noise normally associated with aircraft. Some reports have described objects hundreds of feet across. The apparent silence is one of the features that has made such reports particularly controversial. A conventional aircraft of enormous size flying relatively close to the ground would ordinarily be expected to produce significant noise. Yet witnesses have claimed that some triangular objects seem to glide effortlessly overhead. That combination, enormous apparent size, triangular geometry, slow movement, and little or no sound, has become a recurring feature of UFO folklore. The newly released government records are significant not because they establish an alien explanation, but because they demonstrate that reports of unexplained aerial objects have been documented by government agencies rather than existing solely in internet stories and UFO publications. The Trump administration began releasing UAP-related government records in 2026 following the president's directive for greater transparency. The Department of War says the effort involves records from numerous federal agencies and encompasses decades of material. The latest release is part of a continuing series of disclosures. The mystery of the suited figures, perhaps even stranger, are historical reports involving alleged humanoid figures. One FBI document from the 1960s describes claims concerning small figures associated with unidentified flying objects. According to reporting on the newly released records, witnesses described beings approximately 4 feet tall wearing what appeared to be space suits and helmets. Those descriptions immediately attracted enormous attention because they resemble some of the classic imagery associated with alleged extraterrestrial encounters. But there is an important distinction. The FBI memo documents a report or allegation. It does not establish that the beings actually existed, that they were extraterrestrial, or even that the original witnesses correctly interpreted what they saw. That distinction is critical when examining declassified UFO material. A government file can establish that someone reported an extraordinary event. It cannot by itself establish that the extraordinary explanation is correct. The distinction is particularly important because many UFO reports were created during periods when witnesses had limited access to cameras, smartphones, high-resolution video, or modern tracking equipment. In many historical cases, investigators were forced to rely on witness descriptions. Mystery markings add another layer. Descriptions of strange markings, symbols, or unfamiliar features on alleged craft have also appeared in UFO reports over the decades. Such details have long fascinated investigators because they appear to suggest that witnesses were looking at an engineered object rather than a natural phenomenon. But there are several possible explanations. A witness observing an unfamiliar aircraft from a distance may interpret shadows, seams, reflections, lights, or structural features as deliberate symbols. Likewise, a partially visible object can create patterns that appear meaningful even when they are simply part of the object's construction. That does not make the reports meaningless. It simply means that investigators must separate the observation from the interpretation. A witness may accurately report, "I saw a triangular object." That does not necessarily mean the witness can determine whether the object was an experimental aircraft, drone, balloon, atmospheric phenomenon, or something else. Why military bases matter. The location of many UFO reports is another reason these stories continue to attract attention. Military installations contain some of the most sophisticated sensors and aircraft in the world. They are also places where classified aviation programs, electronic warfare systems, drones, and experimental technologies may operate. That creates an unusual problem. If an observer sees something strange near a military installation, the object could potentially be an adversary's technology, an American classified project, a conventional aircraft viewed under unusual conditions, or something that genuinely cannot be identified with the available information. The government therefore has a national security reason to investigate unexplained aerial objects, regardless of whether anyone believes in extraterrestrial visitors. A mystery in restricted airspace isn't merely a UFO story. It can potentially be an aviation or security problem. The fourth tranche of UAP files released in July, for example, included a report concerning an unidentified object near the Pantex nuclear weapons facility in Texas. According to the released material, personnel attempted to follow the object but were unable to identify its propulsion system. That case illustrates why some UAP reports receive serious government attention even without an extraterrestrial explanation. The 500-foot question, the claim that a triangular object was approximately 500 feet in size, is particularly striking. For comparison, that is longer than many commercial passenger aircraft. An object of that apparent size moving silently over a populated or military area would represent an extraordinary aviation event. But estimating the size of an object in the sky is notoriously difficult. Without knowing its exact distance from the observer, angular measurements can produce wildly different estimates. Something relatively small and nearby can appear enormous. Something much larger and farther away can appear surprisingly small. That is why professional UAP investigators look for multiple data points whenever possible: radar records, infrared imagery, photographs, video, eyewitness testimony, flight paths, and atmospheric conditions. A single eyewitness estimate of 500 feet should therefore be treated as an estimate, not a confirmed measurement. What the files actually establish. The most important fact about the new disclosures may be what they do not establish. They do not provide definitive proof that extraterrestrial spacecraft are visiting Earth. They do not establish that the alleged suited figures were aliens. And they do not demonstrate that every triangular object reported near military facilities represents the same phenomenon. Instead, the documents reveal something more nuanced. American officials have accumulated decades of reports describing things that observers could not confidently identify. The Department of War's own UAP archive makes this distinction clear. The released material consists of unresolved cases, and officials acknowledge that insufficient information can prevent a definitive determination. The government is inviting outside researchers to analyze the records. That means the public is being given an opportunity to examine the evidence rather than simply being told what conclusion to reach. A history of extraordinary explanations. The UFO debate has always involved two competing impulses. One side sees recurring reports of strange craft as evidence that something extraordinary is happening. The other points out that extraordinary observations can have ordinary explanations. Both perspectives have legitimate questions. If witnesses repeatedly describe similar objects, investigators should examine those reports carefully. But similarity alone doesn't prove a common origin. The triangular shape, for example, could potentially be associated with different types of aircraft or objects. And as technology has advanced, drones, satellites, stealth aircraft, and other systems have introduced new objects into skies that earlier generations might not have recognized. That is why today's UAP investigation is fundamentally different from the UFO investigations of the past. Modern sensors can potentially provide information that eyewitnesses cannot. The significance of Trump's disclosure effort. Trump's decision to order the release of government UFO records has transformed the subject from a largely fringe discussion into an increasingly visible government transparency issue. The administration says its effort involves reviewing millions of records held across multiple agencies and releasing material in batches after security review. The first tranche appeared in May 2026, with additional releases following over subsequent months. The significance of the project may ultimately have little to do with whether aliens are discovered. Instead, it could help researchers understand how governments investigated unexplained aerial reports over several generations. It may also reveal which cases were investigated, which were explained, and which remained unresolved. The mystery remains for UFO enthusiasts. The image of a massive black triangle silently passing over a military installation is almost impossible to ignore. For skeptics, the same report raises a different question. How accurate can an eyewitness estimate be when the distance, altitude, and atmospheric conditions are uncertain? And for national security officials, the central question may be simpler still: what was it? That question is precisely why UAP investigations continue. The newly released documents provide intriguing accounts, but they do not close the case. The mysterious triangular craft remains unidentified. The reports of unusual figures in suits remain allegations recorded in historical documents. And the markings described by witnesses remain open to interpretation. Perhaps future releases will provide photographs, radar data, sensor recordings, or other evidence capable of answering the questions left unresolved by earlier investigations. Until then, the most responsible conclusion is also the most frustrating one. Something was reported. Officials documented it. Investigators attempted to understand it. And in some cases, they still don't know what it was. For believers, that uncertainty leaves the door open to possibilities that once seemed impossible. For skeptics, it is a reminder that unidentified is not synonymous with extraterrestrial. But one thing is certain: America's UFO files are no longer sitting entirely in the shadows. And with the Trump administration continuing to release previously restricted records, some of the strangest chapters in the nation's long-running UFO mystery are only now being read by the public.